for being here. Um, and again, I think a really exciting thing, something that I think is much needed. And I just want to once again thank you all for your embracing of the possibility of doing this. I've spoken to a couple of people in my own workplace about this because I had to do a presentation somewhere. And it's surprising how many people actually think it's a great idea, and it's actually looking forward to something like this. So I think we will get quite a lot of interest in something like this. I remember a couple of years ago, we did something similar with Dr. Raju and Prof. Raju, and they took a couple of people through how to write a paper, eventually to the point where people then went through a process, wrote the proposal, and then from there they chose potential people to actually present at conference. So I'm hoping that that's kind of the thing that we would be looking at, or alternatively, we could look at a different way of doing this. But I am all ears because I think you're the expert. So I would like to hear from you how you see this process unfolding, what you would require from our side, and then obviously looking at what is the end result of all of this? Where do we see it going?
Neil can Nazim.
I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now when listening to you. Do you
the program chair? Oh, Profina, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Do you see this sort of as just some preparation or so for people at a time, in a timely manner before they start with their papers, in terms of, I mean, the requirements for writing and the abstract writing? In other words, what you should actually include in your abstract to have the right impact? Or do you see it as a vehicle where we then, based on the progress, make the decisions? I'm not quite sure about the last one.
Okay. It broke up a little bit, so I missed the first part of what you said.
Okay, the first one was, and I'm just double checking, if this is, do you see that this is going to be something where, say, for example, papers must be in May, I'm just giving a month, okay, and in February there is some workshops or so where people are told some of the basic things that will make your paper more acceptable in terms of the appearance and the first impression that it has, and also what struck me with the current the last conference for this year was that there are many of the abstracts that doesn't include the detail that you actually need to make a decision. In other words, people could have included certain things with little ease that would have sort of given them a better chance of getting accepted. Is that what you have in mind? Or is it something different that you have in mind, or are you open for other suggestions?
Perhaps, Nazim, can I also jump in here quickly?
Sure.
I think the initial thinking has been, because we've seen over the years that people are ill-prepared for submitting abstracts for the actual conference papers. And that this would be a way of, as you say, that we can get them to have a better chance, to have a better abstract, to put across their thoughts, their ideas, their research data in a better way, so that they can actually be selected to participate in the conference. But of course, I think it also would mean this is a long-term upskilling of people going forward. in terms of not just submitting to the LIASA conference, but to future conferences and even for publication. So that was my, I think, the initial thinking around this. So I would think that we would need to have a timeline that gives them the opportunity to submit an abstract, have some feedback, have the training so that they can submit an actual abstract out of the training for the 2022 conference, for instance.
Thanks for that. Now, if I can just say one more thing, and I don't want to take over the floor, but that makes sense. And as I said, for a moment, Nazim asked me earlier, how am I doing since this morning, but it has been a long day. For a moment, I forgot that we're talking only about abstracts, which is much shorter, it's more feasible to work. The one thing that somebody with regard to a European conference said to me many, many years ago, once you've got the knack of writing a good abstract, and you've got some solid ideas, then it is much easier for you to get into a conference. And that is exactly what you have now said. So even if for next year or so, one might spend a little bit more time with the authors in terms of telling them what is needed, but then also giving them some input. In other words, because if you're working with abstracts alone, it might be feasible, but as I said, for a long-term thing, it might become very big and time intensive, but certainly to get things from the ground and to build capacity, that might be a possibility. And that is all from me for the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think what Naomi has said, I think is the initial discussion that we had in terms of where we would want to go with this. But I also want to say I'm certainly open to any other suggestions. I think I would rather want us to start with something and see it through to fruition before we kind of really go big and say, okay, what is the next thing, etc. So I'm quite happy with the idea that we work with abstracts, getting people to get that aspect of it correct, so that they have a greater chance of success of having a paper accepted. And it's not just about the LIASA conference. Obviously, we want people to then also come into the fold and be able to present there, because I think that's always the first goal. But yes, the idea is also that they would get comfortable with writing abstracts for any other conference, so to speak. And for me, it's about building that skill set amongst people. I do want to say as well, one of the things that, and we don't necessarily need to answer it here, but something that I maybe want us to just go into is, obviously for conference, and again, we've seen it in this last conference, it's obviously very often it's from an academic perspective. People who work in the academic sector are more likely to submit something. But one of the things that I do want us to think about how you would approach it is getting people from other sectors to also take up this possibility. Most notably, I think from the public library sector, from the school library sector, because we don't get a lot from those sectors. So that's something that I would like to see happening as well, but that's maybe a longer term thing. Neil, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Nazim. Thanks, colleagues. I agree with all the proposals so far, but I'd like to maybe propose a step further, in a sense that LIASA host a writing workshop, and from that writing workshop, it would be a springboard then to submit a working abstract to the committee that's set up to assist. I would also want to see the student chapter obviously initiated and working by then, so that students within our LIS schools can possibly also attend and benefit. So I know Lias is the conference at the moment is quite compact. There's not much space for any developmental sessions in terms of maybe students or other members who have not reached a scientific level where their paper could be published, for instance. But they still need exposure going through the research process and presenting and communicating. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the matter. Firstly, involve the student chapter. Secondly, have a workshop before the event that will showcase some of the top academics in the field and how they've succeeded in writing successfully. And then the delegates are given the opportunity to submit an abstract for the upcoming conference. And the conference may be extended to have that student chapter being able to participate at some level, maybe not on the main conference stage, but at least getting involved with their professional body and the research around it. Thanks.
Okay, so Ina, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to carry on with what Neil said. From my point of view, the writing workshop can be very good, and there are a number of people who are editors of journals and so on, and one can even call on some international experts to do that, because it's a once-off workshop where you might share things that you have already presented elsewhere. And I can think of one name, but I don't want to mention and interfere with that. The other thing is, and then obviously from the workshop to the working abstract, that is fine. There's just something that I want to say about Neil's comment about the student chapter. The iSchool International Conference is next year in March, and they have the full conference with all the normal peer review, but they also have a student symposium. And one of our young colleagues has now submitted a small part of her master's study there. And that is something, obviously it is peer reviewed, but the quality, and it's something totally different. So I would like to see what is going to happen there and get feedback. And that might be something that Liasa can consider. And again, that is something that I think would be a perfect platform would be, for example, be virtual, because then there's not all of the expenses that are involved in travel and all the other kinds of things. Than for a full-scale conference if we get to the point that we are going physical again.
Okay, so just on the student side of things, I think something we haven't done in a long time. But there was once upon a time, I think we had, we even had a prize for the best student paper. And I think the last time, Naomi can correct me if I'm wrong, that we did this, I think was in 2014 or something like that, 2013. And I think it kind of died along the way after that. But certainly, I think there must be place for students, even if it's not necessarily at the main Liasa conference. But again, those are things I think that we can work on. I've also had my own idea about, that it's not necessarily a conference thing, but it's something that happens over and above conference. But those are, I think, other discussions that we can have. So yes, I do think that Neil, that we need to make place for students to participate in this, and I don't have an issue with that. And certainly, I like the idea that we have this workshop on writing and how to write successfully, because I think, as Naomi pointed out, it's not just about writing an abstract for conference. But it's also looking at possibly writing for a publication eventually. So I am quite on board if that's kind of the things that we're thinking about. And if we are to go this route of doing these various things, can we talk about a kind of a timeline as to how we would do this? Who we would get on board over and above yourselves, because I think we also can't leave it too late. In essence, I want conference planning. Well, I actually wanted it to start already, but there are some hiccups. But somewhere very early in the new year is when we will start all of that. So it needs to run parallel to that process as well.
Nazin, can I come in?
No, sure.
I think for us, we as a department obviously have our postgraduate research workshops, and a writing workshop would obviously complement that kind of development. But we also don't want to duplicate things. So if we could maybe get together as LIS schools, see how many of us are offering these kind of developmental initiatives, and then see if there are already existing initiatives, we can either piggyback on or carbon copy some good ideas from it, or even combine it so that we're not duplicating the same thing. I think that might be a good start. And then after that, if the conference is the same time as last year, we need to have it, I think, before before June. And then the writing development would be from June to the submission date. And I think what we could also do, if we do have a student conference, the best papers coming from those student conference submissions can then be elevated to the main conference if there is space. Thanks.
Yeah, if I can just come in here, I like what Neil is proposing. I think it makes a lot of sense to actually use the resources that are already there at the LIS schools and see how that can make it easier so that materials might not have to be totally developed from scratch. Also, I like the idea of then selecting out of, say, a student symposium type or students that can then participate in the main conference. Referring to the timeline, I would see that we would need to look at how the call for papers and the submission of abstracts for the LIASA conference pans out, look at that timeline, and it indeed has to run simultaneously, Nazim. So we would need to look at such a workshop that should run fairly early in the year, because the call for papers would obviously be early in the year. So we are looking at definitely the first quarter of next year for such a workshop in order to have it functional for the conference.
Can I say something?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I agree with Naomi. Maybe sooner in the year would be better to give people enough time. I fully support the idea to draw on what some of the departments in the country is already doing. Because I know of some that has got writing workshops and draw on people. And then in the community, and Nazim, I think you also had your share of being the editor of the journal, sort of, but also Yaya with her expertise and the current editor. And also there are people like Yaya, who sort of are now involved with international journals, and also in my own department, there is a staff member who is a co-editor with an international journal. So what I would suggest is to go this route where we have something that is developed. I fully support that, but also then to look amongst ourselves and to draw on the editors and that we have access to. And I can, for example, as I said, think of 2 international people that might be willing to do this. The one is the research associate with us and who has done this already. And the one is actually going to do something for an upcoming ACES workshop. And so that can just make it richer for people, not taking away the expertise in the country, but just, I mean, if X say this and Y say this and Z say the same, then you know, wow, maybe I should take notice, okay?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So I had a thought and now it's gone out of my head. Okay, so if we're looking at, I think we're fairly all on the same page when it comes to kind of looking at students, what library schools are doing, and not duplicating and drawing on all of that. But just the average LIS person out there who's thinking, dreaming, hoping to be presenting a paper at conference. Let's talk about that person.
Nazim, can I say something again?
No, sure.
I actually, that was something that I really wanted to support. And there are some international conferences where there is really a strong place for practitioners as well. In other words, but then you make it clear, in other words, sometimes it seems from a call that you want academically sound papers, but you can make something from that is really for practitioners, and then you have a specific style and a requirement, and they must meet with certain criteria that is very relevant. In fact, there are some conferences where if your thing is too academic, they don't want it. And I think that is something, I can think, for example, of the European Association of Health Information Libraries. They have very good qualities of papers and abstract and so on, but they're very strongly practitioner focused as well.
Yeah.
And that is the place where we can draw on insights as well.
Okay. So I think my question is more, because I think that that's something that you know, over the years, I think the LIASA conference been accused of both sides of being something and not something else. So in the past, we've been accused of being too practitioner driven, and then there've been conferences where we've been accused of being too academically driven. And it's trying to find that balance between the two things. So if we're wanting to attract both streams, would this workshop and whatever else we wanted to develop, would it be for everybody at the same time, or would you develop something for these different groups? I think that's more my question.
Can I come in, Nazin?
Yeah, sure, Neil.
What I would recommend is that for the practitioners, we change the format of the submission into a story or a case study. So if we take that approach, we can develop the case study as a storyboard, which is a multimedia representation of the case study. And it can obviously include the key points that we need, like the problem statement and the findings and the solutions. But it will be in a multimedia storyboard format, which can then be played on a notice board or a practical demonstration during the conference. And then obviously the theoretical, more scientific papers would then take the form of a written article.
Okay.
So that's my suggestion. And the workshop would obviously can include both, but I think we need delegates to choose one or the other and then offer
Okay.
the workshop in a different format.
Okay. Ina, your thoughts, Naomi?
Okay, I'm collecting my thoughts, okay. Sorry. First of all, if you teach something like abstracting, and a lifetime ago, I used to do that for many years at UNISA. I mean, there are some principles that you teach, and that can be for anybody.
Mhm.
On the one hand, I really like Neil's suggestion for a multimedia platform and so on, but that might also become problematic for people who do not necessarily have the infrastructure and the skills. As I said, on the one hand, it can be very comforting if you don't need to. I've seen people sort of who do their whole recording beforehand because they're nervous, but they present it, then they're there, but they present it in a different manner. So, but I suggest that we sort of reconsider the formats that we are offering for people from that want to take a practical slant, and then I would. Maybe if you stagger the workshop beforehand and the things so that anybody can attend it, but that there is a specific slot that that is dedicated to the practitioner point of view.
Okay.
And then obviously the abstract can be more applying to everybody, okay? Because if you exclude people beforehand from a certain slot, it means that, okay, you're not good enough for this, okay? But you also don't want them to be, so maybe, as I said, if you follow a staggered approach, okay, you can do this, and then comes this, and then comes this, and it might be easier for them. And eventually you want to grow people who would like to also venture internationally and so forth, as was said at the start of our meeting.
Yeah, I think I think it's important for us to consider, what it is actually that we want to present. I wouldn't like to exclude anybody, and Nazim's point of the practitioner is very important. So, but again, having said that, what Ina has also raised is that you don't want people to think that we are putting them in boxes and saying, because you're a practitioner, you cannot submit academic type research paper. So I think all these, things that we're bringing up now gives us a better idea of perhaps how to structure such a workshop. And have all the different elements as part of that workshop, the formal abstract writing, perhaps if there's a different type of abstract we require for the practitioner, but a lot of the principles are going to be the same across the board. But we must just then make sure that we include the option that somebody can say, I would like to submit this type, or I would want to submit, let's say, more the practitioner case study. And if we say, we have been talking about case studies in our call for papers for a long time, but I don't think we've been very clear, Nazim, about what it is that we actually mean by a case study. What is it then that we would want in an abstract submission of a case study, and how do we want them to present the case study? So we've been very vague as LIASA in terms of that. So I think overall, we need to hone that, requirements, say what we mean, give the criteria or the requirements for a style. So, and this can all form part of this kind of training that we are planning.
Yeah, okay. Some good points there, Naomi. Anna-Marie, I haven't ignored you, or Kagiso. Any thoughts from your side at this point?
No, I don't mind being ignored. I think the ideas are very valuable. And it sounds to me like this could be maybe a forum project that be held annually, and that way we can develop more and more people annually. I think once we get the first one out of the way, we can actually have it at any time of the year in preparation for the next year. But yeah, very valuable input so far.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Kagiso, any thoughts from your side at this point?
No, nothing from me. Thank you,
Okay.
Nazim.
No, that's fine. Neil, you were going to say something?
I think Ina's got her hand up, Nazim.
Oh, Ina, sorry.
No, you can talk. I can wait. Okay. Neil?
No, I was just reminding Nazim your hand was up. Ina.
Oh, okay. Sorry. As I said, my hand I went up, but I'm quite happy to wait for anybody else. I was just thinking in terms of different formats, certainly a case study, but I think if we go and check, we'll find that there might also be other formats that might be very interesting. Neil, you mentioned something like a story, and I'm pretty sure if we go to some conferences, international ones like the NLA and ALA, and there are many health librarian conferences internationally, which certainly are aimed at practitioners as well, that might give us ideas, so that, and one doesn't need to do everything all at once, but so that the people who are participating in this and in Lhasa are stronger in terms of what they present locally, but also taking to a wider group of people internationally.
Thanks, Ina. Yeah, I totally support that. I think we'll never box people into a specific format in the conference. They can always choose whichever one they're more comfortable with. But I think many practitioners are storytellers by nature. And to empower them to be able to put it into a visual format through a methodology like visual problem appraisal, where it's a genuine scientific method where you go through the same processes just in a multidisciplinary team, not individually, and document the problem, document the users of the libraries talking about the problem, and then also look at the solutions and recommendations and feedback on that coming from the user. Now, all of that you miss in an academic paper where people often don't read the details. They'll go to the conclusion or the abstract. But in a visual format, all that body language and all that context is so much richer. So I think
Exactly.
For a practitioner, I think they might feel more comfortable in that forum.
It can be very exciting.
Okay, so in terms of where we go next, is it that Neil, you and Ina and Naomi?
I've got a proposal, Nazim.
No, sure, go for it.
Get the student chapter going and then we'll get going.
That is called something else, but it's a good suggestion.
It's on my to-do list, Neil. I promise.
Only joking, but yeah, I think
No.
they're an essential component of what we're trying to plan here.
No.
So the sooner the
True.
better.
No, we have spoken about it at Exco. I've just been the one dragging my feet around it, Neil. It's just been a bit of a tiring time. So I will communicate with you shortly about it. So don't fear. I haven't forgotten about it. It really is high on the to-do list.
I'm just using Naomi's strategy. So when I see you, I bring my
By all means. Okay, so student chapter side, which will be something that we're working on somewhere in this process as well. In terms of developing the content for this workshop, is what I was actually trying to get to. can I leave it to the three of you to write up something in terms of the actual content based on some of the things that we've discussed this afternoon, and then we can work on that as the base document to say this is what it's going to look like, and then just panel beat it into something that eventually becomes the final thing that we can then communicate to the membership and say, here's something that we're going to provide. And, you know, it's now up to you to take up the offer, etc. Does that sound like it can work?
Who's one, two,
Nazim,
three, Nazim?
and Neil and Ina would have to obviously come in because they've got a lot of expertise in terms of the content of such a workshop. I'm happy to be part of that, and perhaps they want to suggest, I don't know, 1 or 2 people from other LIS schools, but I think at this point we should also not make it too big, depends on their availability, but having a base document of what it is that we envisage this to be, it can always then be expanded. But I mean, I'm happy to be part of that with Neil and Ina, and I'll be happy to hear what they would propose in this regard.
Okay, can I say something? I'm happy
Sure.
to contribute, Nazim, at this stage, meaning this stage of the year, and for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not in a position to take the lead or anything on this, but
No, that's fine.
depending on where you want it, if somebody can just start, I'm happy to, from middle of January, to contribute and so on. But, and again, as I said, as Naomi said, it might be a good idea to think who else can contribute. There might be useful people as well that might be retired, also that might be willing to give input.
Yeah.
But
No,
I'm
sure.
certainly willing to give my share as long as I don't need to lead it at this stage.
Okay, no, that's fine, quite understandable.
Nazim, I can propose that I get in touch with our other HODs and just give them an idea of what is planned, and possibly ask for suggestions or contributions, and then get back to you guys.
Okay. No, that sounds like a plan. I think certainly, you know, from our side, I mean, we'll do the minutes from this meeting, and then possibly as the starting thing as well, we'll take what we've discussed here, try to put it into a kind of proposal, and then maybe that can be the starting point. And then in a sense, it gets driven by myself and Liasa. With your input then from there onwards, would that be better, just from a working timeline?
That's great.
That is fine with me as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sounds good. Because I would imagine that you would probably, Nazim, like to have this something early in the new year. I doubt whether in the next couple of weeks you would also be available. There's a lot of other things on your plate, but perhaps one can aim for middle to end of January to have a starting document.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking about. And I think bearing in mind, Naomi, what you'd said earlier, I think we would want to have something up and running possibly in this first quarter of the new year. Because if I look at when we're planning to have conference, we're talking about 3 to 7 October. So bearing that in mind, then definitely, in the first quarter. But then, having the kind of base document, I think, or something to work with from kind of mid-Jan to in Jan, and then we can take it from there. Okay. Is there anything else that you feel we need to note that we haven't covered up to this point? Anybody?
Nazin, Scatlings hosted your conference website for you. How would we approach the writing workshop? Would it be more informal or would it use a similar platform?
So we don't let them do it. I mean, we've basically said it has to run through our website. Yeah, I mean, everything would run on our side. If I understand your question correctly, Anna Marie.
No, but you'll outsource the hosting of the platform, or
Oh, no. We would do it ourselves.
so who was
Nazim,
Scatlings?
sorry, Nazim, would you be using something like Zoom to run such a workshop?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so Nazim, I think we probably will use Zoom for the face-to-face contact. And then if we need to use something like Moodle, for instance, if there are assignments, we can always do that.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Ian?
100%. Thanks, Nazim.
Okay.
Thanks, colleagues.
All right. Okay. Anything else? Or have we covered everything for now?
Yeah, I don't think I've got anything else. Thanks, Nazim.
Mhm.
Ina,
I'm also
anything
fine.
from your side?
Thanks, colleagues, for your time. Much appreciated.
Okay. Then thank you very much, everybody, for being here. This has certainly been a day of exciting meetings for me. And I'm really looking forward to us doing this and getting it off the ground. I think it's going to be invaluable to people, and I think many people are actually going to take up the offer. Well, that's actually a question I wanted to ask. If we find that there's an overwhelming response, do you have a limit that you would want to put on it? Would you want to put a limit on it?
You mean in terms of participants?
In terms of participants.
Yeah, here Neil and Ina should come in, I think.
I think in terms of the, I mean, if you do the presentations, you do the presentations, and as many as Zoom can accommodate can be facilitated. If there is sort of little assignments and whether they have to done, if there is more than one person involved, in other words, say you have 100 people and there are 4 people involved, and again, sort of working for an abstract is not that time intensive, if I recall correctly, but I never recall correctly. But again, as I said, it should be doable. I would not suggest that we put a limit on it.
Okay, correct. Just a thought that popped into my head.
Yeah,
okay.
I would suggest that the workshop is open for as many people as want to attend. But from that workshop, we will then ask for a submission. Yeah. And depending on the program, we'd have to then choose the best submissions to work with for the program.
Okay.
I'll support
so that's
that.
my suggestion.
All right. No, that sounds like a plan.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. If I don't speak to you again somewhere soon, please be safe. Have a good festive season. And I hope to speak to you all in the new year then, if not before then. And all the best for 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazim, colleagues.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Yes, thanks, Nazim. And
have
everybody.
A good break and a good holiday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, same to you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.